Oil change on a Chevy V8. This is a 6.2 liter. Should be either identical or almost identical on the 4.8, the 5.3, and the 6.0. First thing, locate your fill cap, unscrew it, make sure it's not stuck because you can't get it off. You won't be able to refill. And it will usually tell you what grade of oil. So this is a 5W30. This one holds 6 quarts. So I have 5 quarts of 5W30 full synthetic. I always go with full synthetic. And I typically will add 1 quart of some sort of oil product if it calls for more than 5 quarts. So in this case I'm going to use the Marvel Mystery Oil. And if you read the instructions, it says it can be replaced up to 20% of your capacity. So 1 quart of that and 5 quarts of this, that's much less than 20%. Next thing is the oil filter. This particular model uses the PF48. And this particular engine, it is a bear to get to the oil filter, as you will see. Alright, I'm under the engine. You see the oil filter there. It's easy to see, but because of the way they've got it in there, it's difficult to unthread it. Seems like you need some sort of special tool to get it going. This is your oil drain plug. So there, and then there. And this gives you a better idea of why the oil filter is hard to grab hold of. Pretty straightforward. With the fill cap removed, put your drain pan under here, unbolt that, let all the oil run out. You can be as thorough as you want. You know, usually it will run pretty hard for a couple minutes, and then it can trickle for up to an hour, so it's up to you how long you want to let it trickle. Then seal that up, use the proper torque spec, remove that, let that drain out. There's typically 30 seconds to a minute of oil typically that will run out of an oil filter. Then lube up the new oil filter O-ring, thread it on hand tight plus about a quarter turn, refill, drive it to a level spot, check the dipstick, see if you need to add any or remove any. Alright, it is a 15mm bolt. While you have the bolt out, you should inspect it, see if the O-ring needs to be replaced or the whole bolt needs to be replaced. Honestly, this one looks like the O-ring needs to be replaced. I'm guessing this is probably the original bolt. I'll have to see if I have an O-ring that fits it. If not, I'll have to do the best we can by reusing it one more time. I got lucky. I'm doing this at home, not at the shop, and I actually had one that fits there, so I'm going to use that O-ring. That will help seal it. Torque is 18 foot-pounds. There's 18. You see the problem with the oil filter, you can't grab even half of it, so there's not really a good way to turn it by hand. You need a tool that will somehow grab it. All my oil filter tools are at the shop, so I'll have to see if I can make do with just a wrench. To see what I'm talking about, there's really no room to grab and turn on this thing. These straight up and down filter designs have some pros and cons. The biggest con is it running all over itself like that when you start to remove it. So you can poke a hole in the bottom of the filter and drain it first. However, the risk there is if you can't get the filter off, now you're stuck and you can't refill the car, can't drive it. So, knock on wood, I've never had a filter I couldn't get off. Some of them have been a real bear, but they've all eventually come off. So I state that as more of a hypothetical warning than an actual serious problem that happens all the time. And you want to check, make sure that the old gasket didn't stick to the vehicle. Now that's something I've read about. That's something that has never ever happened to me in, gosh, 30, 40 years of changing oil. But hypothetically it can happen. I suspect it happens when folks don't properly torque or lube up the O-ring before they put it on. So I'm going to let that drip a little bit longer, and then when I put the new one on, I will wipe that all down and clean it up a little bit. What you want to do is get a little bit of clean oil on your glove and just rub it around that O-ring there. And that helps it seal, helps the O-ring not stick to the vehicle. You definitely want to make sure that it's spinning very freely like mine is. If it's not, you may have it cross-threaded, and that's definitely something you want to correct before you get it ripping apart the threads. Because of the design and location of this, it's really hard to know if you're truly getting your hand tight plus a quarter turn without using some sort of tool, because like I said, you can't grab it. There's only less than half of it really accessible, so I may be over tightening it a little bit by hand, but I'd rather do that than have it leak later, especially because the driver of this vehicle, I'm not going to name any names, may or may not pay attention to that sort of thing, like, oh, there's oil leaking under it, or the oil light's on, or the check engine light's on. So, short of me happening to notice it, it will go unnoticed until the next oil change. Fill-up procedure is pretty straightforward. If it's a 6-quart system like this one, I'll put 5.5 quarts in, drive it to a level surface, and then top it off as needed. So I'm going to start with the 5 quarts of the oil. And I'll do about a half a bottle of the Marble Mystery Oil. I got it right at 16 ounces, so I got it right at half. That was pretty crazy. So I'll let it settle down for a second, then I'll recap this, start it up, drive it to a level surface, and then we'll check the dipstick. Started up, drove to level ground, pull the dipstick, wipe it clean. You can see on here there's different marks in the hatched area, and normally they consider anything in the hatched area to be okay. I like to go near the top just because if you lose oil, burn oil, or have somebody that has the vehicle that doesn't ever check, it gives you a little extra cushion. So I'm gonna say we're right there, so half a quart more of MMO will be fine. So, you know, these engines with the DOD, active fuel management, there's other terms for it, basically where it shuts down 4 cylinders. and they usually have these weird lifters and stuff that fail. So changing your oil on these engines is even more important than just on a normal engine if you're trying to avoid eventual lifter failure, cam failure, expensive repairs, that sort of thing. I really suggest changing your oil out no later than 3,000 miles. I mean, that should be your absolute last resort, especially the older your vehicle gets. It's just cheap insurance, and all these products on the market that say that they go 5, 10, 20,000 miles, no way. The oil itself may not break down, but there's other reasons why you need to change it sooner. And so anyway, change your oil regularly and check it in between. Make sure you're not burning oil, losing oil, leaking oil. Alright, this one has it built in here. You just push this button until the oil life comes up. You see it says 70%. I wouldn't trust that to save my life. I just held down the check and it goes back. Like I said, the other method would be to turn the key on, press the gas pedal 3 times. That will reset it in a lot of cars. You know, obviously then turn off the key. Or if you have a high-level scan tool like I have, you can usually do it with that. I just don't trust these things. I mean, this was about 1 quart load of oil, and the oil was in pretty bad shape. We're getting a little bit of tick, which with these DOD engines is an unfortunate thing, reality of having them. We're at 78,917. I've been doing regular oil changes, you know, in about 1,500 to 2,000 miles since we got this truck. I have no idea, although I expect that they were not done very regularly at all before we had it.